We only have one candidate here, Isaac Schultz. This DFL candidate, Joellen Burns, was approached by the chamber. She was sent emails and a letter requesting her be here. Also, numerous phone calls were left and voicemails, and no response. So we will let Isaac answer the questions and give his opportunity to share his viewpoints. Isaac, and only one candidate can be voted on, representing State Rep District 10B. And Isaac is the incumbent as well. So for a minute and a half, Isaac, please summarize your personal background and experiences and why you're running for Minnesota House District 10B.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. It's great to be back with you and enjoy the conversation had this evening. Excited to be back on the stage and seeking your support again for re-election for House District 10B. My wife, Julia, and I live between Uppsala and Swanville, and we're raising our 3-month-old Theodore, who was born in July. I'm very excited about him. I work in my family's auction business and work across central Minnesota helping and serving people through that business. And my background and family has made me deeply passionate about protecting our rural, small town way of life, and I've sought to represent our conservative values in St. Paul. And that's been a big challenge these last 2 years amidst a complete Democrat control of state government, with Tim Walz and then the House and Senate being in the hands of Democrats. It has resulted in heavy-handed mandates that have impacted local units of government, like you heard with Commissioner Johnson. It has resulted in 65 new mandates on our school districts, which has placed a huge budgetary burden, which has impacted the educational achievement. And as I look towards the future, I want a Minnesota that is more prosperous, more free, and more faith-filled, and I am excited and passionate about moving us in that direction and representing the values that we share here in this room.
And you've indicated a little bit, but go ahead for the next minute and a half. What are your top 2 or 3 priorities as a state representative serving this area? Why and how did you choose these?
Yeah, the top priority for these next 2 years is working on affordability across the board in Minnesota. Before I came over here tonight, I went and I was door knocking throughout Foley, and literally every single person who I had the chance to talk to this evening brought up affordability as their top concern. Families, whether you're just trying to put food on the table, whether you're dealing with health insurance rates climbing, whether you're dealing with the cost of energy or utilities, these are the top concerns that people have, and it's a focus and a reason why when we look at state government, we need to approach things through a lens of what is a need and what is a want. For too much over these last 2 years, we had a nearly $20 billion budget surplus, and that money was spent and wasted on wants rather than needs. Things like traditional infrastructure, things like water infrastructure, and instead that money was wasted, and we're currently projected to have a budget deficit, and amidst that, we increased spending by 40% in the state budget in one budget cycle, and then raised taxes by $10 billion. And each one of the new mandates and tax increases and spending initiatives results in higher costs for all of us in every different form.
Okay, thank you. And then feel free to bring your questions forward if you have them. The last legislative session provided more funding to K through 12 school districts, but the Minnesota Department of Education published its report card on its website in August with less than 50% of its students statewide meeting the grade level standards in reading, math, and science, although Foley has one of the highest scores than neighboring districts in math and reading at 56%. For the next minute, since K-12 education is the second largest in state expenditures, what are your thoughts on what the state can do to improve the number of students meeting those standards?
What we've learned during the last 2 years is that a one-size-fits-all approach to education does not suit Foley well and does not suit many of the school districts across the state. like I mentioned, there are 65 new mandates on education, many of them that don't suit the needs of a school district right here in central Minnesota very well. And the result is that it takes away from the flexibility that you need to meet the needs of the kids in your classrooms. And we need to focus upon educational achievement so that we can continue to see rising test scores. So I'm glad to hear that we're doing well, and especially compared to the rest of the state. But the focus in education, I'm glad that we have the READ Act and that we're moving in that direction, but we need to continue to reduce the barriers that allow for more flexibility in the classroom to meet the needs of the community.
Okay, thank you. Various state departments have had taxpayer funds stolen or used for fraudulent purposes, including the Minnesota Department of Education's $250 million in Feeding Our Future, Department of Health and Human Services, and $14 million Medicaid fraud from 26 people, and the Department of Employment and Economic Development, $430 million in unemployment insurance overpayments. For the next minute, how can we minimize these departmental oversights?
Well, I wish that a state representative individually had more authority to put the screws to these state agencies. I really wish that we did. But at the end of the day, the sort of fraud, approximately $500 million worth of fraud that we have seen in our state, all comes back to negligence from the chief executive of the state, the governor. And if he isn't going to hold his commissioners accountable and his state agencies accountable, we as the House of Representatives need to hold the budgets of those state agencies accountable. And so in the coming 2 years, if given the opportunity to represent you, and if Republicans have the chance to be in the majority in the Minnesota House of Representatives, what we'll do is we will hold those agencies and those commissioners to account. We'll ask the questions that need to be asked. We'll hold their feet to the fire, and we will do everything in our power to hold those budgets accountable for the negligence that we have seen over these last several years. But at the end of the day, we need the executive to step in here and hold people accountable.
Thank you. A Minnesota Chamber of Commerce report showed that Minnesota had 40% lower new business applications in 2023 than the rest of the country, and ranks as 39th. Minnesota also ranks toward the bottom of the Midwestern states for new and expanding projects with at least $1 million investment. And in 2023, Minnesota had the 7th worst tax system in the country for business. So for the next minute, since businesses and employees pay taxes for state services, what thoughts do you have to improve the business climate in the next 5 years?
I love that. It's great to be talking about the future vision for the state of Minnesota. We need to make sure that we're reducing the sorts of regulations that make it difficult to start a business, and that we're especially helping small businesses grow and thrive in our state. We know here in our community, there's hardly any major employers. We're all family-run small businesses, primarily across this area, right? The largest employer in the district that I represent happens to be Heggy's Pizza. And there's somewhere now around 115 employees, right? That's big business in central Minnesota. So what we need to do is we need to reduce the sorts of burdens like the Earned Sick and Safe Time mandate or the Paid Family Medical Leave mandate that is going to hit school districts, county governments, and small businesses and large businesses all the same. Because what happens in this instance is that it's the big businesses like Walmart or other large businesses that actually can take on that level of burden that small businesses have a much harder time competing in the same realm with. And so it's reducing those mandates and then helping those small businesses thrive and succeed.
Thank you. I don't know if you've heard this, State Representative Mike Wiener from the District 5B in Southwest Minnesota plans to offer a bill that the Minnesota Senate be increased from 67 senators to 87 to allow one senator per county instead of by population. The rationale is to provide equal representation and mimic the U.S. Senate, which has 1 to 2 senators per state. Currently, the metro area has 23 or 34% of the Minnesota senators. If this bill came up for a vote in the House in the next 30 seconds, how would you vote and why?
Thank you. This is the second time I've gotten this fall. But this question, frankly, it would, if we were able to implement this, I think it would benefit Benton County. However, and conceptually, I do like it. However, I believe that there is actually a constitutional challenge here and a question that has to be answered first. And it has to do with when you're serving in the same body, representing the same number of people. So how can one individual that's in the state Senate serve 200,000 people while another state senator represents 5,000 people? Obviously, as someone in rural Minnesota, I love the idea, but we have to really ask the questions to ensure that we're in tune with the Constitution.
Thank you. Last April, State Senator Nicole Mitchell was charged with felony burglary for breaking into her stepmother's home late at night. Since there is no ethics law prohibiting this behavior, Senator Mitchell was allowed to continue to serve and to vote last spring and this fall, often casting a deciding vote. For the next 30 seconds, do you support rules or laws governing the ethics of elected officials to avoid this type of negative social behavior in the future?
Yes.
I do have a question from the audience I will ask. So one of the barriers to affordable housing is the cost of sewer and water infrastructure. What can the state do to bring the cost of infrastructure down or provide assistance to developers or cities?
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about water policy in Minnesota. I sit on the legislative subcommittee for water policy, and I've worked on several water projects for our district. I think that when going back to the whole topic of needs versus wants, to me, water is a critical need. And it doesn't matter what community you're in, whether you're in downtown Minneapolis, whether you're in Foley or Gilman. It's incredibly important that the state place priority on water projects. Every citizen, doesn't matter whether you live on a farm or whether you live in Foley, you need clean drinking water, you need wastewater systems, and so the state needs to do our part to ensure that we have these things for every community across the state to ensure the growth for each of our communities. So for me, I will prioritize infrastructure projects, especially for our district, that prioritize water.
The next question is also for a minute, and I thought I had printed the page, but I don't have it in front of me. But the question relates to the lottery amendment that is on the ballot. And so the written, I wish I could read it to you, but it looks like you're simply extending the proceeds from lottery dollars for natural resources. And my question for 30 seconds is, do you support that lottery amendment?
Gloria,
What?
can we have a minute on this one, please?
Okay, sure. We'll do a minute then.
Yeah, so I've been getting a fair number of questions on this topic, and I don't know how many of you in the room have reviewed what's on your ballot in terms of the question.
Yeah, definitely been reviewed.
You have?
It's crazy. Like, they can tell you that they can put something somewhere on your property without permission, and
Okay,
yeah.
so just going back for a second here, this conversation started with the renewal of these dollars going to help benefit conservation in our state. 25 years ago, when this was voted on, it was very and overwhelmingly popular. I believe 76% of Minnesotans voted for it 25 years ago. Now, one would say with something so popular and conservation and our lakes, streams, water, and our environment being incredibly important, that Minnesotans would also see this as important to move forward. Given the fact that there was no balance at the legislature during the last 2 years, this was taken over, in my eyes, by some who have a more radical way of thinking of things. So the legislation and the question that's on the ballot before you, I am not supporting. I didn't vote for it at the legislature, but primarily because it has brought a little bit more wokeism into the way that these dollars are dispersed. and in addition to that, targeting them to quote unquote minority communities in a way that isn't just representative of the whole of the state. And then the next important point and a big reason why I wouldn't support it is previously for the last 25 years, the legislature has had oversight over the exact projects that these are going to be spent on, and now those dollars are going to be dispersed based upon an unelected and instead appointed board. And I think that needs to be accountable to you all.
Thank you. I did find the legislative amendment in my folder. It says, shall the Minnesota Constitution be amended to protect drinking water sources and the water quality of lakes, rivers, and streams, conserve wildlife habitat and natural areas, improve air quality, and expand access to parks and trails by extending the transfer of funds from the state-operated lottery to the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund, and to dedicate the proceeds for these purposes. And I heard earlier just one comment, and Isaac did make a reference to this too. Foley, needs funds for both wastewater as well as for drinking water. And this new law with this amendment restricts any dollars going to municipalities. So just to emphasize that as well.
Do you mind if I just speak to that for a moment? Yeah, so to provide a little bit more of additional context for you all, so this question has largely been, and the vast majority of the money has been spent on specifically conservation-related, wildlife habitat-related projects over the last 25 years. At times, during the last 25 years, especially Republicans in rural Minnesota have sought to use some of these dollars for wastewater and other water-related projects for municipalities. I certainly would be one who would like to use those dollars for that purpose, but this does restrict it and would keep it only in the wildlife conservation, habitat, rehabilitation related projects. But I'd love to actually hear from you maybe afterwards about your priorities on that.
The next question is, you alluded to it in your goals and priorities, talking about the last legislative session, spending $17 billion in surplus funds, raising taxes by $9 million. But
9.8 billion.
9 billion.
9.8 billion.
And the forecast is that we will only have 3.7 million surplus for 2024 and 25, but a negative 1.78 million for 2026 and 27. So what are your thoughts on what the legislature can do to ensure that in 2026 and 27 we will not have a deficit as predicted?
Yeah, so again, this comes back to priorities. So prior to when I was elected, the state budget was around $53 billion. Now it's $72 billion. It's my goal to get us as close to $53 billion as humanly possible. And that means we need to cut a lot of things. But amidst these last 2 years, when Democrats were unchecked at the state capitol, they created 3 brand new state agencies. They added 2,000 new state employees. And that comes as a heavy, heavy cost for each and every one of us. And whether it's mandates, whether it is on a whole host of different policy priorities, we need to build a list of things that can be cut. And some of these programs were created through one-time spending that aren't paid for into the future. And it's my goal that we sunset those programs and do our best to return back to where we were. Because again, a lot of those things, in my eyes, were wants and not needs.
The next question, Minnesota Department of Public Safety Commissioner Bob Jacobson announced on September 12th that around 1,000 individuals were improperly registered to vote under the automatic voter registration that was approved by the legislature this last year. While the Secretary of State and the Public Safety Department have now added multi-two-layer reviews manually of all new applicants, the public has not yet been informed, as well as that I know of how these individuals, if they have voted or if they're still able to vote. So for the next minute, share your thoughts to ensure that Minnesota elections do not include non-documented residents.
I love this question, and whoever asked it, thank you so much for talking about this. This is incredibly important. Election integrity is incredibly important. I love the local elected leaders that are in this room right now. Our county auditor who's here helping run our elections here in our county is in this room right now. When we think about our elections, they must be secure, and there have been just many instances where I have just huge concerns about the general direction that we're on. This one that she mentions is a really big deal. They passed a bill for automatic voter registration, so when you sign up for a driver's license, you are added to the voter rolls. And amidst that, they also passed a bill for driver's licenses for anyone, regardless of legal status in this country. And that's incredibly concerning. There are so many things on elections. 15 seconds isn't going to do enough justice on it. Thank you for holding me accountable. But there is so much that we have to do. And so thank you to the local elected leaders and the people who've been willing to be election judges to make sure that our elections here are secure. But we have a lot of work to do, including getting back to voter ID here in Minnesota.
The next question has to do with Minnesota employers. They received more mandates this last legislative session, the 2-year program, in earned, safe, and sick time effective this year with increased contributions and paperwork, as well as the paid family leave that begins in 2026, providing up to 20 paid leave weeks in a year to employees for family or medical leave. So for the next minute, what are your thoughts on these mandates that are not funded by the state?
Yeah, it's, I voted against both the paid family medical leave and the earned sick and safe time mandates. A blanket, one-size-fits-all approach doesn't suit us best. It doesn't suit small business owners best. It doesn't suit the employees or the consumers best. When we look at what it's going to cost to pay for our gas, for our groceries, for our energy bill, for our health insurance, all of this is driven by these heavy-handed mandates from state government. And instead, we're taking away the flexibility that our business owners and managers and operators could have to attract the quality talent that they want to have through the benefit packages that they can offer. Instead, now we're all operating from this one-size-fits-all approach that is extremely expensive. And so I'm the chief author of the bill to provide the sorts of exemptions for small business owners for the Earned Sick and Safe Time law, and I'm also a co-author of the bill to provide more flexibility for the paid family medical leave law, and I'll continue to champion a more affordable way of life for us on these mandates.
Thank you. Energy. Some citizens have started to already see higher energy costs in their homes and businesses due to increased EPA and Minnesota Pollution Control Agency mandates, less reliance on coal, which we know is our Excel Becker plant, and more on solar and wind energy. For the next minute, what are your thoughts on these increasing regulations and the cost passed on to the consumer?
Yeah, Republicans famously called that the blackout bill because we're really concerned about the reliability of our grid following this direction that's going to make our whole energy system based around solar and wind. And we know we need strong baseload energy to support our industries, to support farmers, to support heating the city of Foley, right? And it was just last winter when there was a challenge here. And what happened? That meant that the nursing home was without power for 6 or 8 hours, and they had to move all of the residents to the other side. And I'm not saying that was directly caused by wind and solar. But my point of that is we need to have an all-of-the-above approach that to energy that prioritizes both reliability, affordability, and safety. And that's going to be my priority as we move forward, and hopefully we can open up more opportunities for more affordable energy through either hydroelectric or advancing nuclear energy in Minnesota.
Thank you. And our time is nearing completion. So your concluding question for your last minute here, why do you want voters to vote for you? And is there something else you have not told us about yourself or your views that you'd like to share now?
Number one, thank you all. I think I've had several conversations with many of you over the last 2 years, and I really appreciate how engaged you are on the issues. I want to thank the Chamber and to you as well for helping us out in moderating this evening. It's been an incredible opportunity to represent you during these last 2 years, and I want you to know that I want to be the tip of the spear fighting back against what I feel is just this cultural revolution happening in Minnesota, going against the values that we hold dear in this room. And I will champion those Christian conservative values that I hold dear, that I believe that the people of House District 10B do as well. And I want to fight for a more prosperous, a more free, and a more faith-filled Minnesota, but that starts by one bill at a time and building the sort of coalitions that it takes to actually pass legislation. And that's what I'm passionate about, and I invite you to join me in doing so. I really do wish that we had a little bit more healthy competition here on this stage, but alas, Democrats have given up on central Minnesota.
So I want to thank, it concludes our state representative forum. I want to thank the Foley High School for hosting us. I want to thank Bill Colton of Colton Communications for doing the video recording. The forum will be aired in the next couple days at the Chamber Facebook page as well as YouTube. The Chamber also provided the refreshments. Please remember to vote, either now early by contacting and going to the county courthouse, or voting November 5th at your precinct. And let's give a round of applause to